Good afternoon, everyone. Let me change my
Afternoon, sir.
afternoon. Let me check my. Let me change my background. But let's do this. I used to have this background before. Prepare the deck. Okay. Wait for a minute or two. We are 6 so far. Hopefully, we'll get half of the class now, if we're lucky. Good afternoon to those who just joined. We'll start in a minute. Okay, we can start now. It's 5:02. Um, thank you for joining this afternoon. I hope everyone's okay. Just a few announcements first. So again, I hope you guys have started Module 4. We'll start discussing Module 4 today. So I'll give you 5 weeks to cover that. That's my suggested pace. Again, it's more lengthy. It's more dense. The material is more dense. Sometimes it's more difficult. So again, feel free to help each other out. No? Share the load. No, you can summarize things for your classmates and exchange notes. No? So feel free to do some tag teamwork on that. So I discussed last week the guidelines and group assignments for assignment 2. That's still due, I think that's May 7, so malayo pa. So, but you can start your research already there. All right, so some concerns probably. No? So assignment 1, I had the time last week, no, late last week and during the weekend to um, review to read and grade your and really impressive impressive work so far, no? And thank you for the I hope you found whatever your grade was, no, I hope you found the exercise interesting at the very least, no? Because it's an actual thing, no? So for example, if you're working in the LGU, the local government unit, or city hall, no, that's something, or the municipal hall, that's something that you will have to do, no. You see the data, no. Kasi if you notice, no, many of the excuse me. Sorry, I had to sneeze. If you know, if you notice, some presidential candidates are saying, "Oh, we have to have data-driven policies or programs." No? And this is exactly what I'm trying to sort of let you guys experience. No? You have data, and then you formulate corresponding policies based on what data is telling you. No? And as you learn in the participatory development topic, no, it's good to combine different sources. Your take, objective data take, data source, and then the experts themselves are experiencing it. So just posting again the grading system. No, so um, the failing mark is not 69 and below; it's actually 59 and below. So medyo generous yung Soxai 13, most of us. No? So 60 is still passing. No? So I like to think of B as good, um, B plus is very good, and A is really outstanding. I don't give a lot of A's, no, but in this class, I think I gave a couple of A's, no, 2 or 3 A's. No. So if you got an A, no, that means I really saw something that I found really wow, galing. Okay, to good insight or really thoughtful, no, and really good analysis. No. Especially if you took the time to come up with creative and thoughtful, what they call this, interventions. Sorry, that's my kid. He was trying to he knows how to open the door now, even if it's locked. So go back if you're interested in how I graded it. It's basically composed of 4 things: no? Organization, which accounted for 20%, evaluation 65%, and then integrative writing 15%. So those who turned in their assignments late got a 5-point deduction per day that it's late. So I think there were 2 groups who submitted late. Don't remember if it's this class or the other class or both. So if you feel that you did not get a high enough grade and you really want to make it up, of course, aside from homework 2 and the final integrated output, be sure that you also focus on the discussion boards. The discussion boards will be synonymous. No? That will practically be the basis for your online class participation. So that will account for a fifth, no? 20% of your grade. I won't grade per post, no. I read them, no, but I won't grade them per post. I will grade them as an aggregate. No? See how you're participating in the discussion. And if you're really, really participating in the synchronous sessions, that might be a good sign for me. No? I might give you that full 20% automatically. So just a few notes. No? Let me take some time before covering agriculture. No? Which is the first part of module 4. Some notes lang, no? And sorry, I cannot provide, because it's a lot of papers, no? I cannot provide individual feedback, no? So usually I take the time during one of the synchronous classes like this one to provide feedback, no? General feedback. And some notes, no? Just to correct misconceptions, correct certain mistakes, no? So for labor, employment, and income, no, it's counterintuitive. No? But sometimes, unemployment among poor is actually lower. No? Just for additional learning. No? They found this out before, no, when they were doing studies. No? The Philippine Human Development Report, kasi diba, there's the UN Human Development Report. Each country usually has their own local think tank that produces a local version. No? So they found out, no, that sina Dr. Tuanyo is part of that Philippine Sustainable Development Network. No? If you compare, no, it's counterintuitive, but unemployment rates among the poor are lower. Why? Because it's really actually the poor, if you think about it, who cannot afford not to have a job. So whatever comes along, sige, kagat na lang. No? When in fact, it's the non-poor who can take their time and parang, ay, hindi ko feel to. Sige, I'll look for, I'll wait, I'll keep on looking. No? Pero it's the poor who cannot afford that luxury of waiting, no? Or seeking. No? So that's one important thing, no? That, something to think about and remember. No? The labor force, no, equals the number of employed and unemployed. Unemployed, as all of you have already studied, no, it's not everyone that doesn't have a job. It's actually the jobless, but people who are actually looking for one and available. So, and do not compare, wrong grammar. Now, why did I put a D? Do not compare or divide the unemployed by the total population. You only compare the unemployed people Ang universe kasi niya, you divide it by the people in the labor force, not to the total. So, yun nga, I found people making the wrong assumptions or making the wrong computations. No? Mali yung denominator. So be careful. No? You can ask naman if you're having difficulty. There's Google if you want. Low labor force participation is not necessarily bad. Especially kasi parang 20 ano lang, ano ba? 30% now the population is working, no? That is not necessarily bad. You don't know, no? Especially if it's a young population, you don't expect the kids to be working. Diba? Kasi so participation lang naman yan among, no? Among the population, among the people who are in the labor force. Ingat lang dyan. No? Usually, of course, we didn't have the benefit of time series data here. No? Usually, you compare if the labor force participation is getting smaller or lower compared to other, then that may be a red flag. Subsistence poor is a subset of poverty. No? They are not distinct. They are also poor, but they are more poor than the other poor. No? So yung iba, they were saying na medyo distinct. No? Pero hindi. The subsistence poor they are a subset of the entire poor population. And just because, and you saw this in San Remigio, I think, subsistence or food poverty is not the same as experiencing hunger or food shortage. No? Again, it's the amount of money that they earn that is commensurate to fulfilling their nutritional needs. No? Eh kung libre naman, they grow vegetables in their backyard, then it doesn't necessarily mean. So you saw this in particular in San Remigio, mababa yung malnutrition rates because probably they were able, they were able to grow their food for the most part. Diba? So kanin na lang, bigas na lang bibili. Proportion and percentages are kings in development in all papers. No? So I was wondering why some actually just we're already satisfied with just the numbers. No? Magnitudes don't mean anything unless they are usually deflated or made relative or compared to something. No? So use percentages to sort of put the gravity of the problem into context. No? And then you can make a sort of ranking. No? Ito mas malaking percent, then maybe that's a more pressing problem. Or itong is higher than the national average or the Metro Manila average for Marikina. So pwede yun. No? Because percentages allow you. So for all of your social science courses, especially economics, more often than not, magnitude is not as useful as proportion. Maganda yung percentage kasi it's relative to something. You're poor relative to the total population, something like that. And if you're talking about data, include it. Include the data. Include that data. Kasi hindi kita eh. Di ba para, this blah, blah, blah is bad. Prove it. Now tell me na it's bad because it's blah, blah, blah percent. This might be important also for your succeeding assignments. Again, be careful when computing. I saw many erroneous proportions because of the wrong denominator. So sometimes the unemployment, the number to get the unemployment rate, some of you divided the unemployed people divided by total population, which is wrong kasi you only divided by the total labor force, total number of people in the labor force. So ganun, ingat lang. No? And again, as I keep telling you guys, you can consult with me or diba? Ito, many of you, kasi government should provide jobs. Ganito. Actually, as a lesson for you guys, governments are not in the business to provide an employment. Of course, they need to hire people, but they are not supposed to provide jobs. Yes, they can facilitate matching like mga job fair, etc. But so the role really mostly of government is to facilitate, to create, let's say, a conducive environment discussed this in Module 3, no? So that investors will be enticed to put up businesses there and open up employment opportunities. So that's lesson number 1 for most of you. No? Many of you said, oh, government should provide jobs. No, government should not provide direct jobs. No? Unless it's, sometimes it does this, yung mga emergency um, relief systems, no, for the, kunyari sobrang dami ng problem on poverty, no, pwede kayong cash for work, no, or something like that. But that's rarely done. That's rarely done. Safety net yun rather than a sustainable poverty reduction scheme. Education, FYI, is free, public, and it's provided by the national government. Local governments do not actually implement this, no? But they can supplement, yes, with capital outlay, let's say paggawa ng school building or the classrooms, etc., and materials, no, through what we call the special education fund. But yes, no, some of you said, no, maybe you can subsidize the transportation and food. Yes, those things definitely, because the food and transportation, that's not necessarily free. So, and by the way, education is long-term. No? To solve poverty right now, you cannot say education, basic. Pero okay yung iba, like going to vocational, technical, mga testa type things, yes. That can be a good solution. No? Kasi in 3 to 6 months, you have a skill. Pero yung basic education, that is not a solution in the short term, long term. Yes. So if there are pressing issues, combine, no, immediate and short-term responses. No? So I like what some of you did. No? Oh, focus tayo on the kids' education, but at the same time, to solve poverty immediately, do this, no? Vocational training, entrepreneurship for those who want to run businesses, etc. So be more thoughtful and specific. No? Avoid things like, and I found this, I told you this guys now already before. No? Oh, something like, oh, the LGU should provide or give them basic capabilities. Diba? Wala, it's very motherhood. And again, diba? And the LGU should focus on this problem. Yes, but what should they do? Diba? So, when you're asked for interventions, be more thoughtful and specific. No? Na hindi yung mga motherhood. Kaya nga when I watch the presidential or vice presidential debates, I hate it when presidential candidates talk about motherhood statements na paano talaga? How? Diba? Kasi madali lang sabihin na government should focus on it. What and how. Many sort of conflated the concept of informal settlers with informal sector. Magkaiba yun, no? The informal sector are those that run businesses that are unregistered. So the usual suspects, mga fishball vendor, no, those are the usual types, no, mga rumaraket, no, construction worker that you call, no. Informal settlers, those who are occupying, those who are living in houses or lands that are illegally. They don't have the title for it. So walang permission then. So encroachment, squatting, basically. And informal settlers, and I mentioned this before, no, do not necessarily have homes built with makeshift materials. No? It need not be. So yung iba, kino-combine yung dalawang populations. No? And there's a reason why the two indicators are separate. Kasi iba yun eh. Iba yung tenure, which is the lawful right to stay on the land versus yung quality of your housing. Again, as I told you, some squatter families, they've been there for decades, no, hindi naman sila pinapalis. Then they start, you see this, no, especially in Cainta, no, before it got demolished, no, very solid na. It's like decent, ganda ng itsura na, solid, robust, no. And make sure the interventions match the diagnosis. Kasi, di ba, ang ganda na yan, ang ganda ng flow ng iba, you're saying, these are the top 3 things that they should focus on. Tapos, bigla na lang sa intervention, they propose something that was not related. So, dapat medyo cohesive yung paper. No? If you've identified these things as your top priority areas, the intervention should match that. Hindi yung lalayo ka na lang. And just because it sounds nice. Diba? Mind you, no, that becomes in the development world, no, usually ginagamit yan for gender. No? It sounds good kasi everyone's talking about gender. No? And of course, there's a role for that. Maganda. No? Pero bigla na lang magkakaroon ng very heavy gender focus na wala naman dun sa diagnosis. So, you know, but if it's part of the diagnosis, then of course, by all means. So those are just some substantive pointers. No? And ito naman, some writing tips. No? It's a paper, not an essay. No? Some of you parang bullets lang, parang nagsasagot lang ng essay question. No? Some submitted just very short. Okay naman, I like brevity, but again, it's not an essay question. It's supposed to be a paper. And no need for long intro, no? Like para the CBMS is ganito. We all know, no? You don't need to tell me that CBMS is a good tool, blah, 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 or that the LGU did this. It's part of the instructions nga that these LGUs presented that or did that. So no need na for long intro if it's already explained, if we all know what it is. No? To save you some space. No? And as discussed, no, the guide questions are just that. No? It doesn't mean that will be the outline or the sequence of the paper. Pwede namang, I like when people no sort of, they did not repeat themselves. Kumbaga, oh, ito yung problem. Then they in the same paragraph, they came out with the recommendations. So cohesive. Hindi yung, oh, it's a problem. And then mamaya lalabas na naman, there's a problem and intervention. Kasi if you don't create a cohesive outline, you end up repeating yourself. 2 pages lang yan. If it's a 50-page paper, fine, di ba? It's good to repeat certain things towards the end. Pero pag 2 pages lang, di ba? There's no point in repeating yourselves. Follow instructions also, no? What you did, what did you think the LGU did is different from what did the LGU do? No? Some of you parang na happy na sila, na happy na by researching what they did. That's not the point. The point of the exercise is to have you guys thinking, ano ba dapat gawin? But I like the fact that many tried to build on. No? Okay din naman yun. They research muna what did they do. Ito yung gaps pa. Maybe the LGU can. So okay yun. As a build, to build on that and then to improve further. No? So again, if you don't attend synchronous sessions, if I discuss something, you are still responsible for the material covered. And break apart paragraphs. A 2-page paper cannot just have 2 or 3 paragraphs. Yung iba parang, wow, the paragraph is already a page long. No? So learn how to break apart paragraphs. I like when you know people or students include headers. No? It's easier to read and easier to see the different parts, no? And the flow. No? And I like the headlines approach to naming sections. Parang Marikina City needs to blah, 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 blah. Diba? Ganda, diba? Headline approach. Parang sa PowerPoint, diba? Alam mo na eh. And then you just substantiate. So again, for short papers, avoid repetition. So if you can combine things, no? Pwedeng, diagnosis, diretso ka na intervention. You don't need to have a separate section pa, di ba? Again, the guide questions are just that. No? So not necessarily the outline of the paper. So yun, I mean, let me know lang if you have questions, or if not, I will proceed. No? So I hope these pointers, no, you take note of these pointers for your assignment 2, no, for assignment 2 and the FIO. Okay, I don't see any hands raised or anything. All right, I think we can jump to module 4. So today, no, I'll just provide a quick introduction, no, using the government's development framework, the PDP, just to sort of contextualize why we are discussing the 4 topics aside from the 3 are required in the SOCSI syllabus. No? And then we'll jump into agriculture. So again, module 4, module 4 is divided into 4 things. So agri, We won't cover agrarian reform yet. No? We'll cover that next week before we jump into fiscal policy or taxation and public finance. The population demography, and sorry, we're not discussing, sorry, this is an old slide. I should have renamed it. Instead of SME development, we're discussing the role of the private sector in development. Okay. So let's go back no, to the PDP. So the PDP was recently updated. No? I think late, no, not late last year, mid-year last year. Um, to take into account the pandemic's effects. So here, I like to go back to the original framework. No? So it's a 2017 to 2022. No? So it's been 5.5 years, matatapos na. So again, going back to the ambition natin, no? You have three major pillars, no? Enhancing the social fabric, inequality reducing transformation, no? And increasing the growth potential. No? So we discussed the growth potential in Module 3. What are some of the paradigms that can grow the economy, but at the same time, no, be cognizant of the shortfall, donut economics, no? And the sustainability aspect. So in Module 4, no, you'll see this, no, I encircled in red, no, some of the things we will be discussing in Module 4. No. If we had more time sana in this course, no, siguro it's a 1-year course, no, you could have covered everything. Pero we're gonna cover Module 4 lang, 4 topics lang. So expand economic opportunities. No? So and that's why one key sector, one key economic sector is agri. So agriculture is one of the most important economic sectors, and we'll discuss why later. Ito, fiscal policy, trade, the macroeconomic stuff. And that's why out of all the macroeconomic stuff, we will be zooming in or zoning in on fiscal policy as well. And we also will be talking about the demography. No? So part of it really, the PDP is maximizing the demographic dividend. So these three things no, we will be discussing, especially agriculture. And that's really part, no? And it really aligns with what the government really intends to pursue no? At the end of this. So siguro by next, if I still teach in Ateneo, I don't know if I'm teaching next year. No? Medyo busy din sa work. If I will continue to teach SOCSI 13, this will probably be look different na. Or hindi, siguro. Kasi usually they devote the first 6 months no, into drafting the next PDP. So baka 2023 to 2028. So imagine yourselves end of 2028, what will you be doing na by that time? So again, we have 4 things, no? So sorry, this is not SME development, no? In my previous SOCSI 13 class, MECO, I used to teach SME development, pero hindi na. I changed my mind. I'm not teaching that anymore. If you're interested about micro, small, and medium enterprises, get in touch with me. I can provide good resources as well. So I just wanted to go into what do you call this? The role of the private sector, which is kind of related. Okay, so agriculture. So 4 things. No? We'll discuss why agriculture is important. No? Beyond it being a requirement for SOCSI 13, all of us are required to include agriculture as a topic. But other than that, why is it important? We'll discuss that. Issues, what are the major issues in agriculture? Why is agriculture still a lagging sector in the Philippines? Especially if you compare it to the other sectors, to industry and services. And if you compare agri-sector to that of our neighboring countries, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. And we'll also cover what government intended to do, no? Especially this administration. And I'll provide some selected topics also aligned with government's thrusts. No? 2 important things, no? Food security versus self-sufficiency, agribusiness, and value chains. At any point, please raise your hand or type a message in the chat box if you have a question, you want to pursue something, you want me to explain it again, or if you're seeking clarification, just let me know. Okay, so agriculture. Why is agriculture important? Anyone? Why is agriculture important? Aside from, kasi we need to eat. Why is agriculture important? Why are we discussing agriculture? Why are we discussing it in the context of development? Why? Anyone? Why is agriculture important? Okay. Sustainability of biodiversity and indigenous peoples' welfare and well-being. That's part of it. Importing food is expensive, so it would be preferable to be more self-sufficient. We will discuss that later. Okay. I will clarify that, and we will fact check that actually. And the first, no, yes, part of agriculture is biodiversity, sustainability of agriculture, and indigenous peoples. Although not all, no, not all agriculture areas are populated by indigenous peoples, but part of it, obviously. And most indigenous people, especially in the far-flung areas, no, they rely heavily on IPs. So I will expand your thought further, Jack, no, to say that it's actually not just the welfare of the IPs, no, it's also the welfare of the rural folk, no, who many rely on agriculture. Anyone else? It's one of the biggest. What do you call this? It's one of the biggest sector that contributes to our economy. It's connected to the other sectors as well. Yes, definitely. We will cover that later. Local production of raw materials for other industry sectors. Yes, it is connected to other industries. We have a slide on that later, and it's on Canvas as well. Despite being a critical sector, many who are part of it are among the poorest in the nation. Yes. Food production po. Yes, we need agriculture for food production. Okay. Sige. Thank you for that. First things first. Yes, definitely. Agriculture is important because it is one of the important economic sectors. No? Here, no, let's just see the chart on the left first. No? Hanggang 2020 first. No? I have 2021 figures later. No? But see, yes, the funny, not funny, but the interesting thing is, or the unfortunate thing is, agriculture's share in GDP. No, this is share in GDP. No? So the blue is agri, share of agri in the economic output. Dark blue, or is this black, is the share of industry or manufacturing, for the most part in the economic output, and services, yung mga call centers, financial services, restaurants, tourism services, etc. So lion share ito. It's it's unfortunate, it's been going down, the share, no? The importance in the economy, it's going down, no? At medyo nung pandemic, because you could practice social distancing there, no? Medyo umangat ulit, no? Because these two sectors, industry and services, went down significantly. So it still accounts for a tenth, no? 1 out of 10. So it's still something, it's still substantial. Now, if you look at this, no, all the more that it is important because it provides, at least before, no, dati almost a third of employment. Ngayon, medyo 1/4 of employment, but that's still something. No? So 1 out of 4 people in the Philippines are in the agri sector. So mamaya, we will have some slides where we're saying, no, yes, maybe 10% lang yan, no, pero there are some industries that are dependent on agriculture, no, it's captured here. Pero link pa rin siya sa agriculture. And yes, no, IPs and the marginalized rural folk, no, poverty is a rural phenomenon. So agriculture is synonymous to poverty or the countryside. So here, no, 2015 to 2018, wala pa kasing data for 2021 first half. No? Here, no, these are in thousands. No? So the share of poverty, no, in the countryside is actually roughly three-fourths. 3 out of 4 poor Filipinos actually live in the rural side. And the countryside is synonymous with agriculture. So roughly a fourth lang, no, living in the urban areas. So it has actually gone down a bit, pero very ano. So you know, kita nyo, no? So there are 5 million, over 5 million poor people in living in cities. There are more than double of that, no, living in the rural areas. So poverty is a rural phenomenon. That's why it's important. No? If you want to help the country develop or lift a lot of people out of poverty, agriculture is important because most of the poor are in the countryside and they rely on agriculture. So it's the bright spot now, no? Especially during the pandemic, no? Not only was it the only almost gainer, no? Sayang, konti lang. If it were not for the and then Africa swine fever, no, it would have gained. It also shows the potential given social distancing imperatives. So ito, kita nyo, no? Ito, there are differing figures, no? Pero ito, let's say agri and fishery. Wala kasing forestry dito, so it's probably bigger. No? So 7.7, still good, diba? I mean, not good, but it's still substantive, no? Share of GDP, no? Almost employing 10 million Filipinos, no? But here's the important thing, no? In tong dalawang columns na to, it's the forward and backward linkages. Meaning, there are industries that rely on agriculture, no? Whether it's the next part of the chain or sa value chain, no? Which we'll get to later on, no? Or they actually sell, let's say, mga seeds, mga tractors, no? They actually have agriculture as their target market. Or agriculture is a supply to their product. So you'll see this. Ang maganda dito, yes, here, no, if you're strict and really just focus on agri and fishery, konti lang, 8% lang, and 10 million Filipinos. But again, going back to what someone said earlier, no, many other industries actually rely on agriculture. So if you think about it, the importance of agriculture, you can add 7.7 plus 7.9. Diba? Food manufacturing is obviously, it relies on what? Food, which is agri. Diba? So you can add this, no? So it's already almost 15% na, then employing 11 million na. Then some of it also, no, some part of pharma products, no? For example, yung mga carrageenan, no, the capsules that's made of seaweed, for example, no, retail trade, drugstores, no, part of it they're reliant on agriculture, restaurants, obviously, no. So you know it will add up, no, those sectors, no. So indirectly and directly, agriculture is important because other sectors also rely on it. So if you add all of that together, the share of agri and agri-related businesses will add up. Lalaki. And given now, no, and I like this chart done by Dr. Aldaba from Ateneo as well, no, before, no. It's good because agriculture, you can continue, no, even, for example, we're still in a surge, no, in pandemic. That's one of the sectors where there's low risk of infection. Whereas yung mga pabrika, etc., that has a higher risk. No? So ito, good yan. No? During the pandemic, you can continue largely unaffected. So it was the bright spot, and it's still a bright spot now. And I have some, I like stealing slides from the experts, no, sina Dr. Habito. So ito, if you look at it, no, what do you call this? So GDP growth, no, in 2021 was 5.6%. Agri, sayang, no, agri almost grew. if not for the calamities, no, Odette, for example, if not for the Africa swine flu, no, that's if you don't know what it is, no, it's the pig pandemic. Basically, it's a disease, no, that started in Africa, affecting the not poultry, the hog industry. So it would have grown, no? The traditionally low performing sectors, palay, subsectors, palay, corn, for example, no, they actually grew. Pero yun nga, it was pulled down, the agri sector was pulled down uh, by the pig pandemic. If not for this came from Dr. Habito himself, this slide, no? Ninakaw ko lang to. If not for the pig pandemic, agri growth was possible. And you know, he had an aside, no? Basically, sabi niya, oh, palay grew, which basically defied doomsayers on the rice tariffication law or act. So yeah, for the RTL group, no, uh, might be something worth thinking about as well. Okay. So given that backdrop, no, we've examined some of the things that have made agriculture important. No, let me just check again. No? Um, yeah, we'll talk about self-sufficiency later. Just checking the chat if I missed anything. We'll discuss that later. No? A very important topic. Now that we've covered the importance of agriculture, so what do you think are the key issues that have made, sorry, why do I keep making grammatical errors? What are the key issues that have made agriculture the lagging sector? And here, no, I provided the paper of Dr. Roel Briones, also used to teach in the ECO Dep in Ateneo, now with PIDS, no? As well as the PDP also has some good material on this. So what are the key issues that have made agriculture the lagging sector? Based on what you've read or top of your head, what do you guys think? You can type in the chat box, you can verbalize your answers. What are some of the key issues? Low productivity, yes, definitely. Low productivity, lack of government support, yes. We will be more specific later. What kind of government support? What else? Low income of workers. Yes, that's an issue, although that is more of a symptom or as a result of the key issue. But you're right, no? And that's the reason why also there's an aging population. That's why a lot of the young kids, they don't want to continue on that path. Technology is not integrated yet. That's part of low productivity. Anyone else? Can it also be because Philippines is really easily affected by typhoons? Yeah. The resiliency, that's why, nauso na ngayon yung mga climate resilient seeds, mga practices. Yes, definitely. Part of it really is the vulnerability to disasters and shocks. Yeah. Underinvestment in infra, yes, in rural areas, use of unsustainable fertilizers to increase produce, that's part of it also, the actual methods, no? Sige, a lot of it you've already covered. No? So yeah, no, number one, poor total factor productivity or low productivity. There's one more. Oh, also a lot of younger people aren't incentivized. Again, because of low pay. No? And that's here, no? Aging farmers, Bishop. So I'm combining now the key issues, no, that were written up in the Briones paper as well as the PDP. Kasi sa PDP, no, parang what I sort of ask you to do sa CBMS, no. So diagnose issues, what are the interventions. Ganon din yung structure of PDP if you take a closer look. So lack of mechanization, no, fragmentation of land, no? And we will cover this in agrarian reform. Part of it kasi also is Well, one is mano-mano, no? You still have the romanticized din to. Classic no, countryside, what do you call this, picture or nice kalabaw, no, araro, etc., etc. And then part of it also is many crops, no, it becomes more viable and profitable and more productive if they have larger tracts of land. The problem with land reform with CARP, no, was it fragmented lands. We'll discuss that next week, no, when we cover agrarian reform. And you know, total factor productivity, di ba? Land, labor, capital. Capital is machines, no? Kulang sa mechanization, no? The capital in terms of monetary terms, you know, access to credit and insurance. No, farmers, no, especially agrarian farm beneficiaries, they want to make their more productive, or they want to buy technology, let's say a tractor, no. The banks are actually allergic, no, to, they're averse, no, to lending to farmers who don't have good credit history, walang collateral, no. Yun. And it's funny, even let's say government banks like Land Bank, no, who are supposed to or mandated to actually um, lend to farmers, medyo averse din. No? So, although not as averse as the private banks or financial institutions. Poor rural infrastructure, no. So sometimes, I've seen data or studies, no, parang there's a lot of spoilage, no, or because, for example, from Baguio or from far-flung areas, Mindanao, no, they want to sell to Manila or to major urban centers, no. Part of it nabubulok, and also inadequate post-harvest facilities, or the road is not paved, no, bumpy, no, and then nasisira yung produce, no. Sometimes there's 30% wastage or spoilage that happens, no, both because of the weak, poor rural infrastructure and inadequate post-harvest facilities. And part of it also, and this is related to productivity, is the inadequate irrigation. And dito na pumapasok yung someone actually mentioned use of unsustainable fertilizers. So part of it also is kulang sa knowledge, no? Sometimes the technology, quote unquote, or the know-how, the approaches to actual farming, the techniques, no, are passed on from one generation to the next. No formal training, no, not backed up necessarily by research, no. At the local level, no, provinces and cities or municipalities, no, there are local governments that are, there's supposed to be a municipal agriculture officer that's supposed to provide technical know-how. Pero sometimes it's understaffed, no, or kulang din sa know-how mismo yung MAU, no, or the municipal agri officer. No? So it depends on the LGU. And dapat, no, what should have happened, no, the state universities and colleges in the different regions are supposed to, and it's by design, no, they're supposed to have extension services, meaning their professors, no, their science professors, agri professors are supposed to provide technical advice to farmers, but that doesn't happen regularly. So weak pa din yun. Relatively lower budget, and it, the budget in recent times have been improving, have been increasing, but the problem is it goes to the traditional crops, palay and corn, and as we learn later on, it's not necessarily devoted to high value crops or higher value added commodities. Less on public goods, no, less on the research and development that feeds into this as well. No? So yun nga. So minsan they rely on the old methods, no, that's not as productive as the more modern ones. Kasi kulang sa R&D, kulang din yung capacity and probably people or incentive for the state U in the different regions to provide support to the farmers. This one, just to emphasize, no, agrarian reform issues, no, it fragmented lands, no, and other things. We'll cover that next week. And then, as many of you have already mentioned, no, The symptom or the effect of all of these issues is farmers are poor. Farmers and fisher folk are poor. They are actually the poorest. No? If you saw in on Canvas one chart, no, PSA kasi uh, estimates poverty incidence per basic sector. No? Basic sector na naman refers to the marginalized sectors. No? There's an actual law, RA 8425, no? which created NAPSI, which I was a part of before. No? Kaya kabisado ko yung batas. There are 12 disadvantaged groups. No? So they try to measure. No? So among all marginalized sectors, no? formal labor, urban poor, IPs, workers in the informal sector, etc., farmers and fisher folk had the highest poverty incidence. So anong incentive, no? If you're the young, aside from the young kids nowadays, no, more into tech, no, wala ring incentive for agri because there's no poverty lang yan or it's low pay, no. Okay lang sana if it's not high tech but it pays well, then the young generation will probably be attracted to that. But no, hindi na nga tech-oriented kasi nga, young kids, sorry kung stereotyping, young kids are sort of more into tech these days. Hindi na nga tech, wala pang pagkakakitaan. And here, no, especially for those of you who are covering the retail rice tarification law, protectionist trade policy, no, and Dr. Bionis included this, no. I did not include this before, no, but it's good for him to remind this, no. We've, as a country, no, we've long protected the rice industry and even corn. No? What did that happen? No? Alam niyo naman to, no? When you pamper or you shelter someone, no, nagiging spoiled yan. No? So it bred complacency. The rice farmers, sige na lang, even government, no, both the rice farmers and government became complacent. Sige, we'll just extend the exemptions to WTO, for rice tarification, ganun. We'll keep kicking the can down the road, so to speak. And that bred complacency. But many are arguing, no, if you become less protectionist, no, you welcome competition from outside, no, it forces both the farmers and the government to step up, no? to step up. Which is, to a certain extent, no, if you see this, no, going back to Dr. Shell's slide, Dr. Abito's slide, palay started growing, no, after 2 years into the rice tarification law. Palay is already growing. That na-combine yung competition from outside and then mechanization. No? So it yielded good things. So I'll stop there. Baka matulungan ko pa. So there are pros and cons of the rice tarification. So again, if you're too protectionist, it breeds complacency. All right. Just let me know, guys, if you have questions. But if you want more clarity, either ask me or, the canvas is chock full of material there. And all of these are what I'm doing now, summarizing what's already on Canvas anyway. So I like this. I have two favorite cabinet secretaries. Three, actually. The third one is a bit more controversial. Si Willie Dar, who assumed the cabinet position for DA in 2019 or late 2019. Kasi nga, Piñol was sort of eased out dahil tumaas yung price ng rice, that whole thing about, kaya nga nagka-rice tarification. So Willie Dar is a scientist, he has a PhD in horticulture or something like that. So very, very technical, he's a technocrat. Mon Lopez then is one of my favorite ones. And si Villar, of course, he's controversial. Pero kahit pa paano, the infrastructure, a bit slow start, but it has gained ground, if you ask me. So he has this 8 paradigms, si Dr. Willie Dar, Secretary Dar. Modernization, no? That's the whole premise of the rice tarification law. The second half of it, diba? Industrialization is key, no? So that talks about no kasi we'll learn later, no, if you go more into, let's say, higher value stuff like food processing rather than just the basic crops, mas malaki kita. So food processing is fetches higher incomes for the stakeholders. If you know if you do that rather than just selling the crops by themselves as themselves. Exports also to the extent possible. No? If your quality is good, then sige. Here, no, it's turning away from carp actually. They have this consolidation program. No? It's on Canvas. No, I think you'll find it there. No, they're now incentivizing. No, they will be giving loans. No, for cooperatives or farmers banding together and proposing to do something with contiguous tracts of land. Kasi mas productive talaga yan, no? If you have long contiguous land, a large contiguous land. So it's consolidation kasi it's higher productivity. No? Kesa yung fragmented. Infrastructure, obviously, farm to market roads, irrigation, those things, higher budget, and I would add budget going to the right sectors, not the traditional losers. Ito, obviously, legislative support is needed. So, for example, reforming the Agri-Agra law to better provide capital or financing to farmers. No, other things no, that can boost agriculture. No, incentivizing agribusiness, for example. And dito siguro, number 8 is just a reminder to them. No? Roadmaps. No? But although I would argue, no, magaling ang government. No? And I'm a bit skeptical about this. Government is great, no? For the longest time, the Philippine government, since before, ang galing natin mag-drawing. Galing ng government to come up with plans. But it's really the execution. Magaling, no? Other countries, no? They copy our laws, they copy our roadmaps, our plans, pero it's where the rubber meets the road. Eh. Can government implement? And sometimes kahit mag-road mapping yan, hindi naman na-implement. So for me, that's okay lang kung wala or meron. The important thing is, if you have it, you have to execute well. Ito na, no? Many of you, no? I think 2 or 3 people mentioned importation versus production, etc., etc. Okay, let's go here. And I want to, and thank you for those chat messages earlier. I wanted really to clarify and to demystify food security and self-sufficiency and whether importation is good or bad. Okay, what is the difference between, can someone tell me what now is the difference between food security versus self-sufficiency? Anyone? What's the difference? So I'm taking different concepts from the 8-point paradigm secretary there, and I wanted to focus on them just to elaborate further. So ito, now what is the difference and what should we focus on? All right, food security is if you have enough food to feed the population. Self-sufficiency is if that food is produced domestically. Perfect. That's exactly what it is. So food security, there's a framework from FAO yata to, no? Ano, UNICEF. I thought it was from the Food and Agri Organization. UNICEF, as you know, is part of the UN agency. They focus more on children, human capital in children. 4 important things, no? So available, accessible, and affordable. It's there, no? No matter the source, no? Pwedeng local, pwedeng imported. It's people can access it, and people are actually consuming it. And you know, the supply is not intermittent lang. It's stable supply. So these are the 4 pillars of food security. Self-sufficiency, we do not need to import. And this is relevant now, no? And even a year ago, no? Given the ASF issue, no? And higher inflation even, importation, etc. So kasi nga, what happened, sige, just thinking how I will explain this better. No? Sige, so yan, ito, let's put an example. No? Singapore, no? I had a training there once, no? Sponsored by the World Bank. Long time ago. I've only been there once. In 2003 pa lang, impressed na ako. But you know, the problem with Singapore, no? They are a developed country, no? More or less. No? I mean, especially among ASEAN countries. They don't, they're not self-sufficient. Konti lang ang arable land. And their land is really tight. No? That's why I have a lot of vertical developments, no? High-rise apartments. But they are food secure. No? If you were to ask me, sir, paano if they closed their borders, they decided not to import anymore their food, no? What will happen? What do you think will happen? Prices will shoot up. Kasi even if they force themselves to be self-sufficient, no, they're not competitive, no? Konti lupa, ano, konti lang yung farmers, etc. The prices will shoot up kasi nga they're not, you know, and that's the thing with food security versus self-sufficiency. You know? Self-sufficiency is if you can aim for it, if you can aspire for it, much better. But in the meantime, if you are not self-sufficient, and again, part of it is affordability. No, focus on food security. No, hindi pwedeng we want to be self-sufficient, pero it's not affordable naman. Diba? Then useless, diba? So what I'm saying is it is not bad to aspire for self-sufficiency, but make sure that these 4 pillars are accounted for. If not, then you have to sort of have a two-track approach, no? While you're trying, no? And again, the risk of helping further the rice tariffication law group, no? So for example, your prices are higher, for example, for rice, no, bigas, than your ASEAN countries, no. So yes, we're not self-sufficient in bigas. We have higher prices, no. Pwede naman while you're trying to achieve or aspire for self-sufficiency, at the same time, you're making sure that it's more affordable, it's more available. That's why there's also that element of importation. So I will drive home the point when we cover the ASF issue. So ito, pork. Ito, dati pa to, no? September. Price, ito. The good thing is, with ASF, what happened was, of course, a lot of hogs were infected. Some hogs had to be killed. No, there's much significantly lower hog production. And obviously, Filipinos are big on pork. No? We are pork eaters. No? So ito, I took this from a Business World article. I just rejiggered it. No? So ito, you'll see the trends. No? So for example, before, no, it shot up at the height of the what do you call this, the ASF pandemic. No? Grabe yung prices, no? 360, no? When it started, and 400 per kilo. No? You ask your parents, talagang kami rin, no? When I do my shopping kami ng wife ko, mag-beef ka na lang because it's almost the same price na, no? Or mag-chicken ka na lang, cheaper, no? Grabe, no? But then, it actually, because of the importation, no? President Duterte issued 2 executive orders in May last year, no? That reduced the tariffs, no? When you reduce tariffs, basically, you're inviting more imports kasi it's more profitable for them. So, of course, basic supply and demand, more supply, more competition, you'll expect prices to go down. And that's what happened. So ito, if you were just, very hard line of self-sufficiency tayo, kawawa. No, the consumers are facing this much, pero because of importation, no, it actually led to lower consumer prices. So that's the tension in agri. The tension in agri is, if you naman, on the flip side, if you naman invite more importation, it might affect the bottom line of the farmers. Pero it's a win for the consumers. Diba? So yun, may trade-offs yun. So that's the trade-off that government needs to sort of kind of balance. Pero look, 280, 220, 360. No? So it really went down, no, because of importation. No? I'm not saying unabated importation, no? But the thing is, especially if the consumers are facing higher prices, yes, it's good to aspire for self-sufficiency, but not at the expense of food security. That's still the bottom line. Ito muna. If it's not affordable, if kulang sa supply, then think about importing. Kung okay ka na, then yes, you can start eliminating or or reducing your imports. So yun. So again, there's that tension always, no? Especially if you analyze the RTL, yung mga magsasaka, no, very vocal against it, importation, no. Pero if you look at it, no, consumers naman yung panalo, no. So there's that trade-off. No? So importation is not always necessarily bad. By the way, no, just to correct one of you, no, importation is not necessarily more expensive, no. For basic things like rice, for meat products, no, in many ways, no, even if you impose tariffs, may tariffs na yan, ha, mas mahal pa yung local rice, no. Before the whole RTL thing, Vietnam, Thailand were producing rice that was more than half of the price in the Philippines. No? So in a sense, no, if you started importation earlier, no, before, no, mas nakinabang yung consumers. So yun. So that's the trade-off in agri. No, you have consumers that would benefit from the lower prices, but the farmers may be negatively impacted by the I wanted to say more about RTL, but I will be helping the group na too much. So yun. So that's the so again, the bottom line here is yes, there is nothing wrong with aspiring to be self-sufficient. But if self-sufficiency doesn't get you here yet, especially availability and affordability, then go for food security, which means you're okay with some importation. Hindi ka sarado. Just tell me, guys, if you have questions there. Here naman, agriculture, again, it's the importance of scale. No? So this is number 4. Because yung DA meron ding push for consolidation. So larger land sizes are more productive and are more cost efficient. You know this very well, economies of scale. That is basic economics. And management as well. Although eco pala kayo, no? I'm not sure if you guys have any management courses. But this is taught in both econ and management. No? Larger land sizes in agriculture, no? It's been proven if you read the materials I posted there, no? In Philippines, globally, no, larger land sizes are more productive and more cost efficient. Kasi imagine mo lang ito, no? Very simple example, no? Your cooperative will buy a tractor at 5 hectares lang. Hindi sulit, no? But you can maximize that tractor and the sacks of fertilizers you buy, no? If it's a larger piece of land, or the irrigation, no, that you pay for, no, or the facilities, if it's larger, economies of scale. That's why there's a current thrust on consolidation, which is good. It's more productive. And remember this when we discuss agrarian reform. Scale is important. Scale is king in agriculture. Medyo medyo romanticized na, a farmer, smallholder, ganun. Yes, if they can, no. Again, wag na lang. I'll save this discussion for land reform. The problem kasi lang naman, one thing, and ako rin before, no, when I was a college kid, I was still starting my career, no. I was really pro land reform kasi yes, okay yun, di ba? You give poor an asset, it's very romanticized, very ideal if you think about it. Pero there are unintended consequences. And we'll cover that next week. The last thing I think this might be the last slide. agribusiness and value chains. Can someone tell me or give me an example of a value chain and describe how that is a value chain? Why do you consider that a value chain? Kahit basic lang, kahit very basic lang. Can someone give me an example of a value chain? Or sa chat box? Or is the term too foreign for you? It's on Canvas. Maybe you haven't reached that far yet. What is an example of a value chain? Anyone? No clue? Okay, sige lang. Mamaya na lang. We'll get back to it. But don't forget your discussion board. Farmers' crops, market, restaurants. Yes, to a certain extent, no, but that is more, and I can, mamaya, no, I have a slide on that. No, I think there's a difference between value chain and supply chain. A value chain needs a supply chain, but it's not one and the same. That's why it's called value chain. The keyword there is value. Dito pwede naman, no? Farmers crops, it goes to the market, and then the restaurant adds value. Pwede, no? But let me explain that further. No? I'll take your example later. Pero first, no? And that's the third part of the thing I want to discuss. And this is very, 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 especially number 3 later, no? This is very, very important for your NSTP engagements. Number 3. Pero ito muna, no? Let's discuss this. No? The question now is, you want to help the farmers, di ba? How can farmers, and this is number 2 in the 8-point paradigm, how can farmers realize increased incomes and make the sector more productive? One is, if you're a farmer, no, you shift, no, you forget about, or maybe you can split your land, no? Or if you're cooperative, your hectares of land. No? Instead of relying on the old crops, no? Kasi may comfort level naman yung mga tao, slowly shift away from that. No? Yung corn palay, medyo shift away ka dyan. Unless that's organic rice or ano na mas mabenta. You shift to high value crops. Like may list yan I provided a list ng mga fruits, no. I just my wife started becoming a plantita during the so now we have calamansi here sa backyard, small backyard, no, calamansi, we have ampalaya, okra, no. So those things, no, they actually fetch higher value in the market. Fruits, no, mangoes, etc. Of course, it has to match your soil type, of course. So shift to high value crop instead of the traditional rice and corn crops. No, go for those that will fetch you higher spices, garlic, onion, calamansi, no, those things. No. Coconut, although mas matagal lang yan. But some crops, no, let's say ampalaya, it grows quicker, 3 months, 6 months, or you can make money at that, and that fetches higher value. That's the first one. The second is you participate in with turning abaca to piña and husi. Perfect example. Perfect example. And I'll use both examples later. The thing with value chains is you have to add value. How do you add value? You convert the thing into another thing that has that fetches higher price. Yun lang naman ang trick Kaya it's called the value chain. Supply chain kasi, still the same crop, it just goes from one place to the next and to the next. Distribution lang. But value chain is It's still a supply chain, pero at every step you add value or you convert it, no? Just to very explicitly explain it, no? You convert it into something of more value. Kaya the simplest thing would be banana chips. From instead of bananas, ginawa mong banana chips. Yeah, very very simple, no. In ano, those who produce corn, no, from corn nagiging cassava, nagiging feeds, no, for animal feeds, no. I didn't know that before, no? But yellow corn or cassava that can go into animal feeds, no, which is a very in demand, no, in demand sector. So you can participate in value chains either as a basic crop, no value added. No? If it is a high value crop, if you're part of the value chain, you can be assured of more sustainable income, or you can engage, no, if there's a big if you or your cooperative or your association has the capacity to engage in value addition. So, yun nga, let's see this. No? Forget about the input companies, mga seeds, etc. Let's start from here. No? And this is an example. Both of these, this is, I think this is the cacao. Ito, both. No? Ito cacao to definitely. This one, I think I got it from a cacao value chain. So the value chain is, again, at every step of the way, you convert it into something of value. So ito, farmers, let's say cacao. No? Cacao farmers, they plant the cacao beans, no? Meron pa yung wet and dry, no? So they now sell it to the traders, no? And the traders and the processing companies, no? They now convert it into dry fermented beans or whatnot. Sorry, hindi ko rin masyadong kabisado yung process, no? And then, so they add value, no? So they convert the raw cacao bean into, let's say, fermented blocks, no? Which fetches a higher price, no? And then they now sell it to, let's say, Mars or M&M or kung gusto yung local, Surge or ECO A, no? To be converted into chocolate bars, no? And then to retailers, ayan na yung supply chain. No? They now, wala nang value added masyado dito. It's just selling it now, no? And all the way to the consumer. So yes, there's that supply chain kasi it has to go through one, pero in multiple steps, no, it's converted into something else with added value. So the key word in value chains is the value added. Kaya nga many development projects keep on emphasizing dapat may value added because it fetches higher value in terms of money. Ito, kita nyo. This is a chart from Oxfam. If you buy a chocolate bar, no, let's say Cadbury, for example lang, the price you pay for Cadbury, sabi mo ng 150 pesos for that big bar, no? What percent goes to which stakeholder? Ito, farmers selling the local or the raw bean only gets 33%. Pero yung mga nagpo-process, times 2. No? And then those who actually times 20 pa, no? Marketing, etc., etc. So the more value you add, the more money you can. So example here, no? Sir, yung abaca to pinya, definitely, no? Abaca is cheap by itself, no? Pero if you're a cooperative, ang galing ng cooperative yun, may designer kayo, you convert that into husi or pinya, wow, you're gonna earn more money than just selling abaca. Yung farmers crops din, no? When you reach the market, for example, may enterprising person in the market or group in the market converting it into something else, no, before selling it to the restaurant, no? Well, let's say ito, ko-convert niya into malagkit, no? Ginataang bilo-bilo, and then sell that to the restaurant. That will add value and that will fetch a higher price than the basic crop. So go for value addition. But the caveat is if the farmers group or the farmer has the machinery, has the tools, has the know-how to actually do value addition. Pero kung high value crop naman and they don't have the capacity, okay na rin yung selling just the basic crop. Kasi at the very least, higher income because it's higher value and sustained. If there's a market, if the the other players at the higher end of the value chain continue selling more, no, they will continue getting more from their source. The third thing is make sure there's a market for any of this, for your crops, for your value added stuff. Make sure there's a market. The key failure of a lot of past government interventions, no, is puro livelihood na, supply side, no? And again, alam niyo naman, there's supply, there's demand. Oh, we'll teach you pickle making, tocino making, dress making, and they don't work on the buyer side. Sinong bibili? Parang if you build it or if you create it, the assumption is you can sell it, no? But no, for any development intervention, you have to also focus on a market. Make sure someone is going to buy and sustain in a sustained manner. So check out the video of Auro in Module 4. No? So ito, perfect example of a cacao value chain. They get from the farmers, they convert it into something else. No? So assured na yung mga farmers, no? Of that. And then the Auro, they're able to get tons of profits, and they actually help farmers back as a result of that. And there is a market, no? There's assured markets for it, so the farmers are happy. The problem is, if I engage in something, banana chips, wala namang bibili, then so they'll just lose money, no? Malulugi pa, no? So this is very, 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 very important for you guys, no? When you do NSTP engagements. Kasi I've seen this before, no? Oh, we'll help you set up your e-commerce site or marketing, ganun. Pero there's no group focusing talaga on making connections na, oy, liligawan mo, no? Oh, bili na kayo, no? We can produce so and so tons. Kayo, bili kayo, let's agree that you will buy so and so each month or each ano. Pero kung walang ganun, you just convince them to keep producing, hindi naman sigurado there's someone buying, they might end up just losing money. They might just actually, So in any intervention, make sure there is that effort to reach markets, no? To work on markets, to work on the buyer side, not just on the supply side. Madali yung supply side sometimes. It's really who's gonna buy. So that's the number one lesson I will always tell everyone, especially kayo sa NSTP. No? Kasi may tendency, sige, tulungan natin, build a business, ganyan. But what if no one buys their product? So kailangan, you have to focus on that as well. So that's another important thing, no? Agribusiness and value chains. Kaya nga, right now, no, even kami, no, our projects are not, most of the development projects now are not geared towards basic planting. No, it's making value-added stuff and then finding markets for them, finding buyers. All right, so that ends agriculture. We'll cover agrarian reform. No, I want you guys to cover that first, no, before we discuss it next week. No? To make it easier for me to discuss that. And then public finance, taxation, and fiscal policy. So we'll save the rest for so we'll cover module 4 in 4 weeks. So this is our first week under module 4. Okay, any questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you very much, guys, for your engagement, no, for your participation this evening. No, I like the examples, I like the feedback, I like the messages. No, hopefully again, no, next week, no? And hopefully we'll get the same crowd. No? At least there's more than half of you in the room. Again, many thanks. I don't see any questions. So have a good dinner. Have a good evening, guys. I'll see you again next week.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.